Sometimes a single moment changes everything. Not a scream, not a fight, just a quiet discovery. He wasn't looking for secrets. He didn't suspect anything. It was just another ordinary morning. The kind that begins with coffee, the sound of keys, the small talk before work. She left first. He stayed behind for a few minutes, and when he passed by her desk, he noticed the soft glow of her laptop. The screen was open, Facebook Messenger, and there it was. A conversation full of words not meant for him. Words that would destroy everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the woman he had built his life around. In that single moment, his world stopped. Everything that came before, their years together, their laughter, their son, their home, began to feel like a memory from another life. That was the day everything fell apart. They met in 2006, two people who didn't yet know how fragile happiness could be. From the very beginning, it felt easy, natural. They moved in together that same year, and suddenly the world felt like it had a rhythm meant only for the two of them. In 2010, they married. Not in some grand ceremony, not with fireworks, but with quiet certainty. They belonged to each other. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full. They both worked for the same company. He was based in the main office, she worked at an off-site location. It made sense. It worked. They had balance. But then came 2015, the year everything began to shift. It started small the way storms often do. A man, a coworker, began pursuing her. He wasn't subtle about it. He knew she was married. He even knew her husband personally. That didn't stop him. At first, she rejected his advances. She even went to HR several times to report him for harassment, but the system failed her. HR said there wasn't enough proof, no witnesses, just her word against his, and somehow they decided he was more believable. The harassment didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. He told her once, "If the only reason you say no is because you're married, then deep down you must want it too." That sentence haunted her. She told her husband about it, not everything, just enough to express frustration. He believed her. He supported her. Neither of them knew that this was only the beginning of something that would tear them apart. Because somewhere after months of unwanted pressure, confusion, and exhaustion, something inside her gave in. The affair began in January 2015. She ended it first. Sometime in February of 2016, she finally told him, the other man, that it was over. There were no fights, no explosions, no public scenes. Just a quiet, exhausted decision. I can't do this anymore. She wanted to forget it had ever happened. And for a few short weeks, she almost did. Until April 3rd, 2016. That morning began like any other. She got up early, kissed her husband on the cheek, grabbed her coffee, and left for work. He stayed home a little longer, still sleepy, walking past her desk as sunlight touched the corner of her laptop. The screen was glowing, still open. Messenger. He didn't mean to look. It was instinct, the same curiosity you have when you hear your name whispered in another room. But this wasn't about him. It was about them. Two names, two people, a conversation that changed everything. At first, he didn't understand what he was reading. Then it hit him. The words were about an affair, her affair. He froze. The world went silent. His heartbeat filled the room. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't even blink. He scrolled, line after line. The truth became impossible to deny. It wasn't just a message. It was a confession written to someone else. She had told someone about it, how it began, how it ended, how she felt guilty, but not guilty enough to tell him herself. And that's how he found out. Not from her lips, not from a letter or a tearful confession, but from a screen she'd forgotten to close. He didn't know what to do. He just sat there, staring at the words that tore his life in half. When she came home that evening, he couldn't hide it. He didn't yell, he didn't throw anything. He just looked at her and said quietly, "I know." Her face changed instantly. Color drained from it. She didn't ask what he knew.
She already knew what he'd found. There were no lies, no denials. She just nodded, trembling, and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Then came the tears, the endless explanations that sounded like excuses. She said she'd ended it months ago, that she'd been disgusted with herself, that she'd wanted to tell him but couldn't bear to hurt him. He listened. Every word felt like another knife. And when she finished, she said softly, "If you want a divorce, I'll understand." He paused for a long time, then said the one thing she didn't expect. "I don't," because despite everything, the betrayal, the humiliation, the pain, he still loved her. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. She said she didn't want him to stay just for their son, that if he couldn't forgive her, she'd rather they co-parent as friends than live under one roof filled with resentment. But he shook his head. He said he wasn't staying because of their son. He was staying because he still believed in her, or maybe because he couldn't stop believing in her. He told her he was hurt, confused, shattered, but not ready to let go. That night they sat in silence, two strangers who once promised each other forever. The air between them was thick with grief, guilt, and something like hope buried deep beneath the wreckage. And as the house fell quiet, the only thing louder than the silence was the sound of a man trying to remember how to breathe again.
The day after he found out, the world felt wrong. Even the light looked different. Every object in their home, the couch, the coffee mugs, the framed family photos, seemed to whisper the same question: why? He didn't go to work. He couldn't. He told his boss he needed time off. He spent the next week inside his own head, circling around the same thoughts like a man trapped in a maze. Every morning, he opened her laptop again. He didn't even know what he was searching for. Proof? Understanding? Maybe punishment? Something that could make sense of it all. But what he found only twisted the knife deeper. There were searches, dated around Valentine's week. How to have sex with a small penis. 3-inch penis. And more. Childish ones like their zodiac compatibility. Then a background check on the other man. He stared at the screen, speechless. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was humiliation. A world of things he never wanted to know and now couldn't forget. He sat there, realizing that this man had been part of their lives for years, the same office, the same hallways, and all that time, he'd been chasing her, right under his nose. When he finally returned to work, he told one of his office mates what had happened. He didn't expect sympathy, just someone to listen. But instead, the story spread, and he learned something he never imagined. That same coworker, his office mate, confessed she had also slept with the same man, the same one who had wrecked his marriage. It was like a nightmare, repeating itself in real life. The affair partner, the man his wife had been with, didn't take it well. When he found out people knew, he exploded. He sent messages. He insulted her, called her stupid, said she had screwed up royally. He texted him too, the husband, saying their sex life had never been his business, that they were two consenting adults. The arrogance, the cruelty. It was endless. Then came another message to his wife. "If he kicks you out, don't come running to me. I'm not taking you in." A real gentleman. The office became unbearable. The other man started showing up on his floor, pacing, watching, trying to intimidate him. Sometimes he parked his car right next to his. Other times, he would sit across from his desk and just stare. It was harassment, pure and simple. Finally, his supervisor intervened. She went to the man's manager and said he was not allowed on their floor again. If his department needed something from that office, someone else would have to handle it. At home, things weren't any easier. Her family, her parents, her siblings, all turned their backs on her. Every one of them told her the same thing. If he kicked her out, she'd be on her own. No one would take her in. No one would help her. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be completely alone. Her parents told him, the husband, that they respected him and that they would support him in whatever he needed. It was strange, painful.
The woman who had broken his trust was now surrounded by silence, while the man she betrayed received compassion from everyone around her. Still, he couldn't hate her. He looked at her and saw someone shattered, terrified, full of regret. And maybe, somewhere deep down, he saw the woman he'd fallen in love with, still buried beneath the guilt.
He could have left. No one would have blamed him. His friends, her parents, even strangers on the internet, they all said the same thing. She betrayed you. Walk away. And maybe part of him wanted to pack a bag, drive away, and never look back. To let the pain fade in the rearview mirror. But every time he looked at her, he saw something he couldn't ignore. Not the woman who'd hurt him, but the woman he'd once built a life with, the mother of his son. The person who, for nearly a decade, had been his home. He remembered the laughter, the late-night talks, the way she looked at him before everything broke. He couldn't erase that. So he made a decision, not out of weakness, but out of something deeper. He stayed. He told her, "I don't forgive you yet, but I'm not giving up." Those words hit her harder than any anger could, because staying meant facing the storm, not running from it. It meant waking up every day and reliving the pain while still choosing to hold on to what little light was left. At first, it was unbearable. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, his heart racing, the images replaying in his head like a movie he couldn't turn off. He'd look at her sleeping beside him and wonder, how could she? Was any of it real? And then she'd wake up crying too, apologizing again and again until her voice broke. They started therapy, not marriage counseling, but individual sessions first. She wanted to understand why she let it happen. He wanted to learn how to live with what he now knew. There were nights they barely spoke, days they pretended everything was fine for their son's sake. But little by little, something started to change. She deleted her social media. She cut ties with anyone who had even known the other man. She started writing letters to him, to herself, apologies she never sent but needed to write just to breathe. He read some of them. And in those pages he saw not excuses, but raw guilt, shame, and heartbreak. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it made him believe she truly wanted to make things right. Over time, the storms grew shorter, the silences less cold. They still fought, but the fights no longer ended with someone walking away. He began to realize something. Forgiveness wasn't a single moment. It was a process. 1,000 small choices made in the dark, hoping one day they'd see light again. Years later, he still remembered that night he said, "I know, it had broken them both. But maybe, just maybe, it also became the night they started rebuilding, not as who they were, but as who they could still become."
Time moved on. Not fast, never fast, but enough for the wounds to stop bleeding. Days became weeks, weeks turned into months, and somehow years passed. The affair became a scar, something always there, but no longer open, no longer fresh. 8 years since the day everything fell apart. 8 years since he looked into her eyes and saw the truth that shattered him. And yet, they were still together. No lies, no secrets, no reason to doubt her anymore. If anything, they had become closer than ever. He worked nights now. She had been injured at work, back surgery, months of recovery, so she stayed home. Every day, when he came back from the night shift, she was there. They had lunch together. They ran errands, talked about everything and nothing. He drove her to appointments, carried the groceries she couldn't lift anymore. Somehow, those small, ordinary moments felt more meaningful than anything grand they had before. He'd catch himself smiling when she laughed. That same laugh from years ago, the sound he once feared he'd never hear again. It almost felt like a new beginning, like the universe had given them another chance, and they'd finally learned how fragile love really was. But then, something started to stir inside him again. A memory, a whisper, a shadow that never fully left. It started when he saw a post online, someone asking if reconciliation after betrayal was possible. Without thinking, he replied. He told his story, how it had been 8 years, how they'd survived it, how love had somehow endured, and then the comments came. Too bad you like being cheated on. She's still doing it, you just don't know. It's not too late to divorce her. He tried to ignore them. They were strangers. They didn't know her. They didn't know them. But words can cut deeper than silence. And suddenly the old pain came rushing back. He started thinking about that week again, the week she said it all began. How could she have slipped away? When? Where? He remembered her searches on the laptop, the ones he found after Discovery Day, searches that made no sense, searches that made everything hurt worse, the confusion, the disbelief, the aching question that never left him. Why? 8 years of peace, and now his heart was breaking again, not because of something she did, but because of what memory refused to let him forget. He watched her one afternoon, sitting by the window, sunlight brushing across her face. She was humming softly, the same way she always did when she was happy, and he thought, she's right here. She's not that person anymore. But another voice whispered back, then why does it still hurt? He didn't know whether to tell her. He feared she'd take it as an attack after all these years of rebuilding. She had done nothing wrong since. She had been loyal, loving, devoted. But his heart still carried the echo of that betrayal. Was it normal to still feel it? Was he broken for not being able to let it go completely? He didn't know. He only knew that silence had weight, and that the longer he kept these feelings locked away, the heavier they became.
The night was quiet, just the sound of the clock on the wall, and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He sat alone on the couch, staring at nothing, 1,000 thoughts running through his mind. 8 years. 8 years since the truth tore his world apart. 8 years since he promised himself he would heal. And in so many ways, he had. They laughed again. They dreamed again. They built something new out of what had once been ashes. But healing, he realized, didn't mean forgetting. And forgiveness didn't mean the pain was gone. It was still there, quiet now, but heavy, like a shadow that followed him everywhere. Sometimes he'd wake up and look at her sleeping beside him, her face soft, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. And for a moment he felt calm, until the thought returned, the thought that always came back. She chose someone else, even just once. She chose someone else. He hated himself for thinking it. He hated that after all this time, he still couldn't silence that voice. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He remembered what the therapist once told him. Forgiveness isn't something you give once. It's something you keep choosing over and over again. And maybe that was true. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a destination. Maybe it was a road you had to walk for the rest of your life. He knew she'd done everything to make things right. He knew she regretted it. He knew she loved him, truly, deeply, and yet his heart still carried the scar. He looked toward the bedroom, saw the faint light spilling out from under the door. Maybe tomorrow he'd tell her how he felt. Maybe he'd say the words he'd been swallowing for months. That night still hurts, not as blame, not as accusation, but as truth. Because love, he'd learned, isn't about pretending the pain never happened. It's about holding each other through it, even when the echoes return. He stood up, walked to the window, and stared into the quiet street outside. 8 years. A lifetime in the making. And somehow, despite everything, he still loved her. But deep down, he couldn't help but wonder. Would the pain ever truly fade? Or was it just part of him now, woven into who he'd become? The night swallowed his question. No answer came, only the sound of the clock ticking on, marking time, marking healing, marking love. If someone broke your heart once, but spent a lifetime proving they'd changed, would you ever be able to love them the same way again?